Borlaug, and they're both here. They're both guests. When we come back after this, I want to talk about environmentalism, because there's some people, environmentalists, who think that some of this genetic modifying and all this stuff is being done may not be good for the planet. And there's also people that are just against genetically modified food, as we call frankenfood. And we want to talk to the two guys who really can answer that question: Dr. Norman Borlaug, my biggest hero on the planet, and Leon Hesser, who I also like. I'm Penn Jillette. I'm here with Michael Godot. We might take a few phone calls, too. 866-570-PENN. That's 7366. We'll be right back. This is Penn Jillette in Las Vegas, Nevada, spending the whole break there just trembling with Michael Godot that we couldn't believe we were really talking to Dr. Norman Borlaug and Leon Hesser. A lot of you, I know, listen near computers. If you're near a computer, both Godot and I have read the book, The Man Who Fed the World. Go to Amazon or wherever you like.
It's on Amazon right now and coming out to bookstores on September 5th.
We've got September 5th, but you should pre-order it, because if you pre-order it, then they make more of them and more people get to see it. And I think that anyone who doesn't know who Dr. Norman Borlaug is will want to know more. The book is called The Man Who Fed the World. The author is Leon Hesser, Hesser, and we're talking to both of them on the phone. And I wanted to go, I'll give the phone number in case you want to call in and say that you were at least on hold while we were talking to Dr. Norman Borlaug. 866-570-PENN. That's 7366, and it's pennradio@gmail.com. For both of you, you have, and I don't know the right way to put this, I know that when I think environmentalist, I think Dr. Norman Borlaug, but I do know that you have butted heads with people who call themselves environmentalists, and I also know that there's a great deal of controversy over genetically modified foods, which they call frankenfoods, and I'd just like to have you talk about that, Dr. Borlaug. Would you a little bit? If you're still online, yeah.
I don't know, do we lose him? You guys there?
Norman, are you there?
He might have thought we were off.
Oh.
Why don't we'll work on that in New York, and why don't you take that?
Yeah, very well.
Okay.
Well, it's been demonstrated, I think, pretty well that Dr. Norman Borlaug has saved hundreds of millions of lives from hunger and starvation. I think it can also be said that probably he has saved more habitat from destruction than any other person living, and that is because with his technology we get the increases in yields without having to cut down more trees to clear more land to produce more food. So it's puzzling to me, and I think also to Norman, why the so-called environmentalists object to this marvelous technology that helps us increase yields and increase the quality of the food.
Are you on the line there, Doctor, now?
Yes.
Okay. The question I asked was, I said, although I consider you an environmentalist and the greatest environmentalist there is, you have, for lack of a better word, butted heads with some people who claim to be environmentalists, and there are people coming out against genetically modified food, and I just wanted to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Well, sure, I'd be glad to. For example, from the standpoint of land saved, talking about world cereal production, and the cereal grains are the number one item that is the basis of our whole food system, both for direct consumption, like in the case of rice or wheat, or much of it converted to animal products, is the case of maize or corn. In 1950, the total world production of all of the major cereal grains was about 620 million tons. By the year 2000, it was more than 1.9 900 million. In other words, about three times as much as it was in 1950. So, and that great harvest of the year 2000, 600 was produced on 660 million hectares only, or if you want acres, you have to multiply by 2.5. I've lived in the third world so long, I think more in metric system. But the point is that we would have had to have cut down approximately 3 times as much forest or plowed up 3 times as much grazing land, probably poorly suited for agriculture, to produce the harvest of 2000 compared to the harvest of 1950 with the old technology. That's what the high-yield technology saved for Mother Nature, for those interested in wildlife, for all of us, from the standpoint of keeping a favorable environment.
You brought up a point that I do want to tell people, and that is you're not someone who stayed in Iowa or at A&M University doing this research. How much of your life, you're 92 years old now, how much of your life have you spent in third world countries getting dirty?
I've spent 62 years in food deficit developing countries, with the exception of 1 semester of each year. For the last 20, I've been a visiting professor at Texas A&M. I'd like to point out also that I'm fairly well schooled in environmental issues and wildlife issues. I was trained a forester, worked for the Forest Service, lived in the most isolated areas of the world at one point in time in the Middle Fork of the Salmon River in Idaho, the biggest primitive area for that time in the lower 48 states. And I have a good feel for wildlife. One of my secondary interests as when I was in graduate school, and I've maintained that, and I've continued to work with forestry groups on tree improvement, plantation improvement of trees to save land untouched in natural forest.
I just want to point out to our listeners that you saved hundreds of millions of people, and then you have secondary interests, which is which is just fabulous. I have a letter here. I really think that a listener sent in that says, Dr. Borlaug, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and then she gives a URL, the world already produces enough food to feed every person in the world. However, many countries lack the money to buy this food. Do you believe this is true? Do you think something should be done about this? Thank you for your time. You are truly a great man, and that's from Grand Rapids, Michigan. So the question is there enough food right now to feed the world?